Is Ronda Rousey making excuses when she says she was badly concussed prior to her 2 losses in the UFC, which then led to her exit and transition over to WWE? Well, I don't think she's telling a tall tale with regards to being concussed, and I wouldn't necessarily write it off as an excuse, because I believe it's true. She was probably subject to repeated concussions while she was doing judo, and I'll double back to that in a moment. But I think really it's more of what I would call a misplaced explanation, and I'll come back to that in a second. So for sure, I can completely believe that Ronda was concussed multiple times in judo, because even though the objective for a judoka is to throw their opponent flat on their back on the mat, as you can well imagine, maybe sometimes those throws aren't exactly perfect, or sometimes the person who's about to get thrown doesn't want to get thrown, and so they block the throw by sticking their head out to kind of prevent the other person from throwing them fully. That means you wind up getting your head smashed into the ground. And I guess we hear more about concussions from boxing and the striking arts, because people get knocked right out. But the thing is, when you get hit or kicked in the head, there's air around your head, so there is place for your head to move. When someone grabs you and smashes your head into the mat, there's no give in the ground, so your head's getting pile driven into the ground. So if you don't get completely knocked out, you're still suffering from a mild concussion. And as we know from better research lately, the key thing when you get a mild concussion is to rest the brain completely. That means not only do you not continue with the sport for the moment, you don't go out to a disco, you don't get overstimulated with bright lights, so you shouldn't go to a casino and hear all that noise and dinging and the bright lights of the slot machines. You should not do a test if you're in school. You don't want to subject your brain to any sort of taxing activity. Now that said, of course, in martial arts and in the fight game in general, coaches and athletes, we tend to value toughness, so the tendency is really for the athlete to just go back out there to prove they're okay, and to just, as we say, suck it up and keep going. So yeah, no doubt in my mind that Ronda suffered multiple concussions in judo, and then that probably carried over into her MMA career as well. Now here's where I feel that really played a role in Ronda's losses to Holly Holm and Amanda Nunes, both incredible strikers. Well, first off, I mean, Ronda's striking game was always lacking. And so if she knows that she's suffering from sort of post-concussion symptoms while she's training in MMA, I'm going to guess that she did not subject herself to hard sparring, because she knew that simply a jab could wind up, giving her a headache. So I'm going to guess that there was a lack of effective sparring in her training camps. And unfortunately for Ronda, at that point of her career, she was already such a superstar that her camp was likely just going to enable her. If she said, yeah, I'm not going to spar, they probably were like, okay, sure, whatever you want, whatever you want, champ, you're the boss. Whereas what should have, could have, would have been done would have been to hire some incredibly talented technicians in the striking game and instruct them, look, you're not gonna hit her hard, but you do have to throw at her and just let her know, like, pull your punches short, pull your kicks short, make sure she can see that she was about to get hit, but don't actually follow through, and certainly don't follow through hard. Now there are people that are that skilled out there that could do it, and even if, let's say, Ronda was made a mistake and actually was about to walk into a kick or a punch, there are people out there who were so skilled that they could read that and then adjust accordingly so that Ronda wouldn't have gotten hit. And certainly at that point of her career, I think Ronda had enough financial support available to her that she could have afforded to seek out and pay those highly valuable sparring partners. More than likely, I would guess they would be men, only because, you know, numbers game. There's more. There are more male combat athletes out there than there are female athletes. And the thing is, if they're female combat athletes who are at that skill level, they're probably still in their competitive prime, and they may not be willing or really want to be a sparring partner who has to pull their punches and kicks. On the other hand, I think there probably are lots of skilled male strikers out there who would gladly welcome a paycheck to get in the ring and not make themselves a punching bag, but to really work with a world-class athlete and effectively be like a second instructor in the ring in live time. But the second bigger issue, I think, is that I have still to this day is really, why in the world did Ronda Rousey stick with that striking coach, so-called striking coach Edmond Taverdian? He just seemed to be a yes man who didn't have enough knowledge or background to really help Ronda round out her game. I have had a little bit of direct contact with Edmond, only in that I saw him in the context of boxing over at Wildcard Boxing Gym. I remember him coming to Wildcard and bringing his fighters. Monday, Wednesday, Friday was sort of like known to be the open sparring mornings over at Wildcard Gym. So lots of boxing trainers would just bring their cadre of fighters and to get some work. And all I remember about Edmond is being pretty underwhelmed by him. I do remember watching him do mitts with one of his fighters and just being kind of like shrugging my shoulders, thinking, you know, like, this guy's mediocre at best. I also kind of think that Edmond felt that sort of pressure at Wildcard, in that he was certainly not a world-class level boxing trainer, and yet, you know, there were definitely world-class level boxing trainers in that gym bringing fighters in. I'm not just talking about Freddie Roach. I'm talking about the visiting coaches, as it were. So yeah, I mean, I was just not impressed with Edmond as a boxing coach. Now you're adding all the other 6 weapons, right, in striking game, plus grappling and ground submissions. My only answer for why did Ronda stick with Edmond at Glendale Fight Club would be because maybe she just wanted to stick with her longtime training partner, Manny Gamburian. Ronda met Manny at Gokor Chevichin's Hayastan MMA. I'm sure when they were both like kids, juniors, competing in judo. Manny Gamburian was also a national level judo fighter, and I think Ronda's mom hired him to work with Ronda on her judo while Ronda was competing in judo. So when Manny kind of transitioned over to MMA and was on The Ultimate Fighter and then signed to the UFC, you know, maybe Ronda just felt like she wanted to keep training with him, and since Manny was with Edmond, I guess maybe she followed him there. But again, I really question that decision to stick it out there, because again, at that point of her career, Ronda could really have gone to any boxing coach or any striking coach, and they probably would have been willing to work with her, not just for the money, but also because, and not just for the fame, so to speak, but also because, you know, she's a world-class athlete who wants to learn. Right off the top, I could tell you down at Wildcard that Freddie Roach worked with, of course, Georges St. Pierre. He worked with Andrei Arlovsky. Tyron Woodley trained with another trainer at Wildcard. Since way before Tyron was even in the UFC, he was working on his boxing skills at Wildcard. Who else has stopped by? I think Nate Diaz stopped by, or Nick Diaz stopped by with their crew. But point being there that, you know, I'm pretty sure if Ronda at that time had stopped by Wildcard to see if she could get some boxing training, somebody would have worked with her. If it wasn't Freddie, it would have been one of the other highly reputable trainers who developed under Freddie. Second thing is, like, or another option for Ronda would have been she was pretty tight with the late great Gene LaBelle. I mean, he's one of the, I think he got her started in MMA, maybe in a sense, and he also probably had something to do with her push into the film industry. But through Gene, Ronda could have accessed a real striking coach. Certainly Benny the Jet was a strong affiliations with Gene. And even though we might say, well, gosh, Benny's style is not really suited to MMA, actually Benny has a really good understanding of grappling. He's a black belt in judo himself, but my point there is Benny's like an old school striker. His kickboxing is really built off solid boxing skills, and he can throw. If you take a look at some of Benny's old fights, or some of his kickboxing fights, he does wind up throwing his opponents with really beautiful harai goshis and whatnot, and foot sweeps. So, you know, he might have been, well, he certainly, as a world-class competitor, would have been more knowledgeable, I think, than Edmund. So, I'm saying all that to say that's my biggest question, not so much the concussions, which I don't doubt. My biggest question is, did Ronda not understand that she had these gaping holes in her MMA game in terms of the striking, number one? Number two, did she not see that Edmund was not at all even a local class striking coach? You know, if you can't bring your fighters into Wildcard and hang, then what are you doing on the world class level? So that's really my question. You know, why did she stick with Edmund? So let me know your guys' thoughts. Do you think Ronda was just making up excuses with these concussions? And do you have any insight into why she stuck with Edmund Taverdian for so long? All right, well, let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and thank you so much for listening.